Current session is the live, work, govern using the net fundamental law. And I'll give these guys, the speakers, to introduce themselves.
My name is Josie Fu. I've lived and worked on the Navajo Nation since 2000. I was staff attorney to Chief Justice Perdiasi for 8 years, and now I'm the executive director of Indian Country Grassroots, which is like a law research firm, but also does a lot of programs on the ground, including disability and mental health. Mike just noticed that we're all lawyers on this panel, which is unusual.
Don't hold that against us, though. I'm Mike Komersky. I am a climate change and land use policy fellow at Pace University School of Law. We work with Josie's team on identifying existing legal structures and seeing if they are sort of capable and appropriate to effectuate some of the changes that Chief Justice Herbiazi will talk about here today. And with that, I'll pass to Chief Justice Herbiazi.
A constant edge Herbiazi, a rede na mission the net for Washington, Dana a con, a rati ahe, a regenon shinar shishka, anahui ahe or yo, a social management sector. About our management sector. The natural con dice a con distinct as also about connoissance. Please don't get the impression by reading the agenda that I represent the Navajo Nation or the Navajo Nation Supreme Court. I long retired from the government, and I'll talk to you today in my own personal capacity. And so I want you to understand that. Like I said, I've been a lawyer and a judge. I'm retired. And during that experience, I learned that there's a more important for us Navajos than any, there's a more important body of law that we should know about and that we should live by. And that's the net fundamental law. In my personal opinion, that takes precedent over any laws that you see written in the books made by human beings. Because what we're talking about today, when we say fundamental law, it's the way I try to describe it is, it's the set of instructions that we were given as human beings when the holy people blessed us with this land and this life. They said this comes with a set of instructions, and you gotta live by it if you want to live as a decent human being. It comes with duties and responsibilities, just like any law. And it has consequences if you don't live by those laws. That's the law that I believe takes precedent. And Ebony, the snake, I'm not here to talk about white man's laws. I'm a retired lawyer, but more importantly, in that sense, I'm a recovering lawyer. Because what I feel about what's in the books is the cause of a lot of our problems. Ako trabaho na sa dole.
So on the screen, you'll see a bunch of very beautiful brooches. Perhaps if they were to stand for something that we were told, each brooch is different. Their arrangement is different. They're very creative. Some have a center, some have double rows, triple rows. Some don't even have a center, and some are stones all by themselves. What I've been told is that when you're young, you ought to wear the single stone until you have a family, and then you wear the double stone. And if you wear many different lines, then you are a real matriarch. You have lots and lots of layers to your descendants. But it also stands for, back in the day, before the long walk, when folks, when you wore the brooches, people knew your status in your family. Also, the way that you arrange your brooches told people how your matriarchy was arranged. Each one is up to you. And each of them had ways of communicating with other matriarchies. And there will be later slides about that. When there was travel and connection between the matriarchies, people knew what each other was doing. People knew how the problems were being solved, and they all followed fundamental law. It made sense. They were self-ordering. They didn't need a police from outside because there was not any. They had a matriarchal flow of how the territory, immediate territory, was managed. So there was no conflict. So the men, for example, would not conflict with the women. So just to start, that is the significance of this image.
And so in 2022, Chief Yazzie published a call to action in the Navajo Times, and it's there on the screen for you to read. And the gist of it, if I'm be permitted to summarize rather than read, is the change has to come from within, right? The reason why so many of these problems exist is because Navajo Nation has internalized colonized laws, right? It's permitted outsiders. It's kind of ironic coming from the Biligana on the panel to be talking about this, right? But it's permitted outsiders to sort of import their laws, and hasn't used some of those the flexibility also sort of built into those laws to adapt in a way that would be consistent with Diné fundamental law. But at the end of the day, it has to be Diné, the people in this room, who call for that change and shape that vision in a way that can solve some of the problems that currently exist on the res. Building on that, right? So we, right, these academics from New York City, pat ourselves on the back because, you know, we're at the forefront of sustainable development law, right? What does that really mean? It means, sure, it means taking action today that considers future generations. We didn't invent this, right? Diné's been doing this for hundreds of years. But that said, there is now a recognition with Biligana lawyers and even federal policy to some extent to look to all indigenous values, but we're here today in Diné values to effectuate change. And we believe now is the time, considering the relatively favorable political climate, considering where things were in the past, and the recognition of Diné fundamental law, to make those changes.
This is an image of how the situation might have been before the long walk on Dept. As you can see, you have little pony riders going in between, and those we're told was the Nalchidi. When I pass it back to Chief, he will explain more. So the Nalchidi went back and forth, and in the middle you see a little gray gathering, and that was a Nalchid. This was the orderly universe before the territory of New Mexico was established. The Spanish, I guess it was too far north for folks to bother so much. But when the Americans came and established the New Mexico territory, they began driving the Dene out. It was genocidal. So things halted. There were a lot of destruction. The Nachit wasn't so well forming at the time. So let's fast forward to after the Treaty of 1868. No, not yet. So at that time, when folks returned from Fort Sumner after a lot of death occurred, they were limited to a small area. So some of the folks who stayed in the small area managed to continue legally this matriarchal settlement in the Chiska area. But as we all know, a lot of people went west. They went to the illegal reservation. And so you could not have a functioning, interconnected matriarchy there because you were illegal. So people in the Western Agency till today are much more self-sufficient. They're not very connected as in still the Chiskas. And finally, in the Eastern Agency, it became a checkerboard, which also makes it really difficult for this to survive. So before I pass it to Chief, this image shows you what happens when you ignore the settlement matriarchy. You have a homestead in the middle of nowhere with no livestock. You have a housing project filled with graffiti and a lot of fires, apparently. And on the bottom right is what the Westerners have for themselves. They have an integrated building with probably a bowling alley, cafe, residences, a city. That's an integrated life that is being denied on the reservation.
Ibayen ki Asho nakabikit of king. Kont otsukas anabo eat inkla. Eat inkla. So akwa hata aniya. Your own values, your own principles. Eto eko inashteho. Nana khade shinte has anita ed chutros ed bikhaho no. I kunsatas ane eat inkla. The result that we are showing to you is the result of the imposition of a foreign set of laws, principles, and values that is foreign to the Navajo people. Upon central, or in a way, in an attempt to summarize what I'm saying, is that I will use the presentation that I heard this morning at this conference. When it came to climate change, the title of the presentation was Navigating Climate Change. Navigating Climate Change. To me, my understanding of that means that we all have to address the consequences of climate change. The drought, the extreme weather, the heat, all of that. The government, you are finding ways to help the Navajo people address those consequences. That's good. But what we are trying to illustrate is that in order to comply with the net fundamental law, the set of original instructions, we have to do more than navigate. We have to mitigate. We have to take action to stop the consequences. We as Navajo people, because the net fundamental law teaches us. Because anil ye do we keho achego we know there will be consequences. And what we're talking about this morning was the consequences. My question to you all is also think of how you stop climate change. You don't contribute to climate change. Our own government has to learn to do that. So I would pose the question to you all. Why do we engage, for example, in the excavation of the minerals on a massive industrial scale? The principal one being coal mining. We know what it does. We see it, climate change. But we continue to allow our resources to be mined. And in fact, we create an enterprise to mine elsewhere. We're only aggravating the problem. So, fundamental law teaches you that this is Mother Earth we are talking about, Father Sky. Kienna ntetse the yin adat to niche kom did ask the yin adat, they are alive, they are sacred. And you have to treat them as such. Akonate ash, akwit inch of what ours need. Oha get a no. A peso a about kiss. We have to change our thinking because our elders, our ancestors told us we need yet and see one. No, it's not. Nihia. Totin ere donde. Anahot eo. Kade the dini. Abba Hazan. You know when to stop. A continue as a summary of what we're saying. I wanted to post that to you. He beyashki tohare da shkinda. Shema shje zastwi even antindat even behas ane that a con. Dide behas ane bayashki Bitsesa leva yashki. And that ina yotiko. It's the foundation of who we are. Akon. Oyoshinsa. Atok nation. Atish all ya. Edo men naskan. Edo dago. Eye batati. Eye ishin eti ata. Those are common responses to what I'm saying. But your mother is suffering. Ni ayuni nena kita honi. Na close na kai kai hondo son. Yine na ki honi. The all the climate change. Kita ni what in la a con. Kahasan. Total. Ade di Kahasan. Ajobe na kini kindole. Ola ajabo. Nothing needs to be all yet the fundamental law. Don't get it's immutable. The Lagana is out. You're not punished your skin. Remember, get our name. It's immutable. So that the cloud is nation. The last line is clean. DDA account is a non-honorable. Then what's a whole year? Adishia Hawker. The legislature will not Adisha send this change together. Up a hand slump is a cheap versus chin. What a cheap. That's a non pro hand that's a trade. The are mentioned.
I know we're running out of time. Yesterday, there was a forum here discussing fundamental law, and it's so immutable, it's so self-evident. But perhaps it has to be said, but it seems that it's not self-evident enough. So what is it that is self-evident that was not discussed yesterday? Everything is related. That was not discussed yesterday. But it's so self-evident, related to Mother Earth, related to each other. So when there was a matriarchal settlement system, everybody looked after everything. You were not set on a piece of land. If the land did not work, you prepared the land for how it would work for somebody else, and you moved someplace else. That was how it used to be. You were not tied to any place, whether you like it or not. You moved, and if you moved, you made sure the land would be secure for Mother Earth and also for the next person. It was always a related circle of mutual assistance, mutual teamwork. That was so self-evident. And why is it people are asking, what is fundamental law? It is so self-evident that it's hard for even lawyers to interfere in it. But Mike is going to talk about how lawyers can help.
Yeah, so, massive issues like climate change require big collective solutions. But we're not without hope, right? There exists existing laws, existing structures where the Dene can set forth their vision for the future. It won't be easy. It's not going to happen overnight. And considering sort of the size, the breadth, diversity of communities and clans within the Dene reservation, it'll probably be contentious. But over the past 40 years now, there's been updates the existing federal laws that permits called integrated resource management plans. It would effectively permit a tribe like the Navajo to set forth a tribal vision, which is a powerful expression of tribal sovereignty, basically designating what is important to the Dene, right? If you think what Chief said today is important, that's what put in there. If you think, I don't agree with everything Chief said, we want to tweak it a little bit, that's what's important. But as a collective society, you can determine your future through a tribal vision. And one of the most important benefits of that is you can get waivers of the federal regulations that have really been at the root of so many of the problems within the reservation, right? Not just the problems that kind of directly lead to the climate change we're seeing today, but some of the problems that just don't align with Kay and Hojo and Dene fundamental law, like the single-use permits, artificial property lines. You can collectively, you can create a document, a vision, where you do not have to be bound by those restrictions in the future. But it's not an easy task, right? And I don't have to tell this room, but Navajo Nation is particularly unique amongst unique indigenous tribes, right? There are other tribes within the United States that have tribal visions, but they're small. They don't have, a landmass the size of Portugal. They don't have people holding lands under, 4 different sort of ownership structures, right? So it's going to be even harder for Navajo Nation to put forth a tribal vision to address the problems that are hitting Navajo Nation even harder. That's the irony of it. Even though you're feeling the brunt of it, it's going to be even harder for you to get out of it. Which is why the work has got to start now, right? As Chief said very bluntly, right? The age of energy extraction, mineral extraction, that's in the past, right? We have to stop thinking about short-term profits, and really short-term profits that aren't even staying within the Dene community, let's be honest, right? We have to start thinking about multi-generational stewardship, right? We have to start thinking about energy sources that don't ruin Mother Earth and Father Sky. Thank you. And we have to start getting policymakers listening now. And in the coming months, we hope through Josie's organization that we'll have some role in that. And if anyone wants to get involved, please, reach out to Josie, and then we'll see how we can get more people involved going forward, because I know it's a corny thing to say, but right, it takes a village, it takes a reservation. It's going to take the whole tribe to get together, put aside differences between East and West, and then come forth with a tribal vision that can help move this tribe forward and away from sort of the destructive policies that are really causing the climate change that we're experiencing every day. You want to talk about this?
These are pictures of European cities where livestock have right of way. Yesterday was discussed how the European Union had tried to destroy this practice because of well-meaning regulations. They tried to stop the making of homemade cheeses because they required everything to be sanitized and pasteurized, which put a lot of farmers out of business. So what the farmers did was they organized, they pushed back. They actually got some lawyers like us, mostly Biligana lawyers like this guy. And then they made each of their nations create a communal herding as a national heritage for 10 different European nations. After that, they went to the United Nations, and they got legislation after legislation there, ending in December 2023, when they recognized this type of communal herding and this livestock right of way as a global heritage. So it's protected. So let's say you're a European nation like Spain, where there's drought. So there's other kinds of science other than what the federal government has right now that says if you manage livestock properly, put them in enough numbers, rest a piece of land at one time, cover one land with feces, then put livestock into the other part, the native grasses will be massaged back to life. And in fact, that is happening in Spain. So the Spanish government not only did that, they regulated the ability for seasonal communal droving. They built bed and breakfasts along the way for the cowboys to rest, but also tourists. They built wells along the way on a certain route, so all these separate livestock can come together into one route. It became a major enterprise, and it has rejuvenated those communities. So that's what this means. When people are told, no, it's dangerous for traffic to have all this livestock, look what Europe is doing. And they tell me everybody else they can't do it.
Well, I'll just make one point before I pass it to Chief to close, and that's part of the reason we like to tell the story is it sort of exposes a fundamental hypocrisy with Western lawmakers, right? When people in Spain, Italy, and let's face it, white people in Europe do it, oh, it's a tourist attraction and it's a UNESCO heritage, but this room knows that the Dene have been practicing communal droving for generations, and here it's just illegal, right? And Western policymakers, American policymakers have not given Dene practices and Dene customs the same sort of deference that they've given to European customs, right? But there is, it may only be lip service, and I'm sure you've been blown smoke before that hasn't worked out, but there's a real effort within the federal government right now to give deference to, call it indigenous technical ecological knowledge. That just means Dene fundamental law as I read it, right? So now is the time that, to the extent we're able to speak up and get policymakers to listen, got to strike when the iron's hot.
Dans agi or kit a con or which in a net or the he compare us fee. Thought I'm hit a yak. Time change what ye Benina eat on because Adam. Now, start art Anna who's on there, but a con, a large life. She upbeat and on hidden. Legend that uranium that oil that edit and he come, edit on it. They cut. It is a daily, oh, you know, the little are there, the whole thing. He Tahiti. Then they are using now as the examples we showed you are just examples of what other people in other countries are trying to do to address the threat that we all face of climate change. A constitutional, I use the English word, is an existential threat to humankind. Nihini ka. To hari atait inko. Ani ose tenakandot. Kaya. To nihi nakaatchen nakandot. To konta tahwen jish. Akon ebenina. Later after the internet, the bear has only a honey laha, and they had in short only a. They're not unique, Tony A. Keho. You cannot another uncle chapter, Wonder Rock, EIA, the hard those knees. Ebe hard yards like Edole. Toshinki Egi Edole. Upon. We have to address climate change. We must not simply navigate it. We have to mitigate it. We have to try to stop it. We cannot allow our governments, ourselves, to continue mass industrial excavation of our resources, because that's the cause of climate change. There are many other causes, but that's a principal cause. Ako. Has gonna be up. The you wake up. Don't get that street the door. You wake up, something not a ya. You can have the kids or cut on it. But